Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We are diving straight into a public health alert that has some pretty significant global ramifications, especially, for traveler safety and the whole integrity of our pharmaceutical supply chains. We're looking at a serious warning, and this came from major health bodies. We're talking ADGI in Australia, the US CDC.
Right.
And it's about a counterfeit human anti-rabies vaccine, Abhirub, which is apparently circulating in India since late 2023.
And what makes this particularly alarming is how it was discovered. This wasn't a routine check.
Oh.
No, the warning was prompted by actual confirmed rabies cases in travelers who had come back from India. They'd received this specific vaccine.
So it completely failed.
It completely failed.
Yeah.
The CDC notice in late 2025 flagged that this counterfeit version, it might not just be useless, but actually harmful. And that's what led Australia to immediately tell its citizens, look, if you got Abhirub after that November date, treat it as invalid. You have to restart the entire course.
Yeah. That is just a devastating failure of the system. But, okay, let's look at the manufacturer's side of this. Indian Immunologicals Limited, or II, they put out a statement confirming the counterfeit batch was gone. But they also got into the safeguards, what's supposed to happen.
And this is where it gets interesting. They emphasize that every legitimate batch goes through this incredibly stringent quality check. It's tested and released by the National Control Laboratory.
Which is a top-tier lab, right?
Absolutely. It's a WHO Geneva pre-qualified lab. So the official system, on paper, is robust. But it's clearly being bypassed by illegal operators.
It really highlights the gap between having a regulation and actually enforcing it.
Exactly. For patients caught up in this, the anxiety must be immense. But the protocol is clear. Go see a healthcare provider immediately.
And the medical advice here is actually quite reassuring. They're saying a repeat vaccination for rabies is considered completely safe.
It is, and that's a key point that needs to be clarified for anyone listening. Why is it safe to repeat this specific vaccine?
Yeah, what's the science behind that safety net?
The safety really comes down to the type of vaccine it is. The rabies vaccine is what we call an inactivated vaccine.
Meaning it uses a killed virus.
Exactly. It's not a live virus. It can't replicate. It can't cause an infection. So the risk associated with repeating a dose or even a whole course of shots is negligible.
So you might get a sore arm, but that's about it.
Pretty much. Maybe a very, very rare chance of an allergic reaction. But that's it. So when there's any doubt at all about the first dose, the medical consensus is always to revaccinate. You have to guarantee immunity.
So it's not just allowed, it's actively recommended in certain cases. What are those specific circumstances?
Well, the first is obvious. If you doubt the quality or authenticity, like with this counterfeit Abhirub. But it also applies if the patient didn't stick to the schedule.
Right, if they missed one of the required dosing days.
Exactly. Or if the dosage volume was wrong. Another huge one is the cold chain. If that vaccine wasn't kept properly refrigerated at any point, its potency is gone.
And what about the patient's own health?
That's the final piece. If the person is immunocompromised, their immune response might not be strong enough from a standard course, so they might need a repeat or an extra dose. With rabies being 100% fatal once symptoms show up, you just don't take any chances.
This whole issue just tragically underscores a crisis that India has been battling for years.
It does. India is still rabies endemic, and it accounts for a shocking 36% of all global rabies deaths.
And that number is it's hard to comprehend. That's between 18,000 and 20,000 deaths every single year.
And we can't ignore the demographics. It's a really painful statistic. But 30 to 60% of the cases are in children under 15.
And that's often because a small bite might go unnoticed, or a parent might not realize how serious it is until it's
tragically too late. The whole fight is now focused on the National Action Plan, which aims to get rid of dog-mediated rabies by 2030 through mass dog vaccination and, of course, guaranteed access to treatment.
Okay, moving from critical failures in public health to some emerging challenges in infrastructure and economics, let's turn to the government strategy on airport privatization, which is now heading into a third big phase.
That's right, a huge strategic move. The Ministry of Civil Aviation has sent this comprehensive new proposal to the Public-Private Partnership Appraisal Committee, the PP packet.
And this covers the monetization of how many airports?
11 airports.
Yeah.
But they're being offered up for tender in 5 bundled groups. The plan is to get the actual tender process launched by March 2026.
The bundling strategy is what really jumps out here. So they're not just selling off individual facilities, they're pairing them up.
Exactly. And the logic is to make the less commercially attractive airports more viable by tying them to a high-traffic, stable one.
So, for example,
For example, Amritsar is bundled with Kangra, Varanasi is grouped with Kushinagar and Gaya, and Tiruchi is with Tirupati. These airports were all chosen from AI facilities that handle, between zero point 0.1 and 1 million passengers a year.
and the idea is they have growth potential, but need that private investment to actually handle it.
Precisely.
And this all feeds into that much bigger government push for asset monetization, right? The National Monetization Pipeline, the NMP.
Exactly. The NMP was this really aggressive financial plan to raise capital from existing, or brownfield, assets to fund new projects. The target for fiscal years 2022 to 2025 was a staggering 6 lakh crore.
And the airport sector was supposed to contribute a big chunk of that.
Well, a chunk. They were tasked with contributing about 20,782 crore across 25 airports. That's around 4% of the total NMP value.
But the sources we're looking at suggest the aviation sector has been lagging a bit.
It has been called a laggard, yeah. While the overall NMP has done pretty well, hitting 88.3% of its target, that's mostly thanks to roads and railways, aviation has struggled.
But the government isn't backing down.
Not at all. The new asset monetization plan for 2025 to 2030 has an even more ambitious target of 10 lakh crore.
This aggressive push, though, it brings us right to the central risk that everyone talks about, the creation of a monopoly.
And the concentration is already pretty stark. The Adani Group, which already got 6 airports in the 2019 round, then acquired GVK's stake in Mumbai and Navi Mumbai. That brought their total to 8 major facilities.
Which really echoes the kind of concerns we saw with the airline duopoly crisis. When there are limited options, costs just go up for everyone.
They do. It limits bargaining power for airlines, and ultimately the passengers pay the price.
Let's use Thiruvananthapuram Airport as a case study here because it really illustrates how this plays out with real costs for passengers and some regulatory issues.
Thiruvananthapuram is a textbook example. After it was privatized, the regulator ARA approved the first tariff revision.
And what happened to the fees?
The user development fee, the UDF, for domestic travelers just spiked. It went from 506 rupees to 770 almost overnight. With more increases scheduled, landing charges went up too.
But the real issue wasn't just the price hike. It was how they justified it. Something about underreporting revenue.
That's the key detail that ARA, the regulator, flagged. Non-aeronautical revenue, so money from shops, parking, restaurants, is supposed to cross-subsidize the fees charged to airlines and passengers.
To keep those core costs down.
Exactly. But ARA found that by lowballing their future revenue projections from all those shops and services, the privatized airport could argue they had a bigger revenue gap that had to be filled by jacking up the essential user fees on travelers.
So the regulator is now trying to pivot, to shift the focus from just revenue targets to actual service quality.
Correct. The focus is moving towards service benchmarks, things you and I would notice. Wait times at security, how fast your bags come out, check-in efficiency.
And there's a real penalty being proposed.
A direct financial penalty, a 5% reduction on the airport's tariff, which would directly lower that user fee if the airport fails to meet these benchmarks in an audit. I mean, given that only about 6% of Indians even travel by air right now, the growth potential is huge, but you can't build that growth on monopoly pricing and bad service.
This struggle to enforce public good in the infrastructure space, it leads us to a much, much graver discussion about systemic failure in the justice system, particularly around acid attacks. The recent case of a survivor, Shaheen Malik, just brings this into heartbreaking focus.
Her story is just a devastating metaphor for the flaws in India's legal process. She was attacked in 2009. After a 16-year legal battle, the 3 main accused were acquitted by a Delhi court late last year.
16 years.
16 years. She lost vision in one eye, she went through 25 reconstructive surgeries, fought all that time, only to feel that this acquittal is just going to terrorize other survivors and stop them from even trying to get justice.
And that fear isn't an exaggeration. The statistics on justice for these specific crimes are, well, they're grim.
They're worse than grim. If you look at the 2023 data, Indian courts processed 703 acid attack cases. The result, only 16 convictions.
16 out of 703.
16 convictions versus 27 acquittals. And that's not even counting the ones that just drag on forever. On top of that, we know it's severely underreported. The official number was 207 cases, but organizations like the Acid Survivors Trust International estimate it's closer to 1,000 attacks a year in India.
The nature of this crime, using corrosive acid, It's just one of extreme personal violations. What are the motives behind these attacks?
The vast majority of victims are women and young girls, and the perpetrators are almost always men. The analysis shows that about three-quarters of attacks on women are related to personal relationships.
Like revenge for spurning advances or dowry disputes.
Exactly. It's a crime of vengeance. It's designed to permanently destroy a woman's identity.
Now, India does have a strong law. Section 124 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. It mandates a minimum of 10 years, up to life in prison, plus a fine for medical costs. So if the law is strong, where's the failure?
The implementation is the choke point. I mean, Mrs. Malik's quote is so telling. She said the case took 16 years when it should have taken 6 months.
So it's systemic delays.
It's systemic delays, it's shoddy police work, Mrs. Malik alleged evidence was ignored, and pervasive judicial insensitivity. She even said the investigating officer pressured her to settle out of court.
Which suggests a complete institutional failure to protect the victim.
A profound one. She had to fight in court for 9 years just to get the 3 lakh rupee compensation she was legally entitled to. Her own charity supports 300 survivors, and she says not a single one have gotten a conviction.
And the most basic regulation, the 2013 Supreme Court mandate requiring an ID to buy acid, that's just not being enforced.
It's described as poorly implemented, which is a huge understatement. It just turns the whole system into a tragedy for survivors.
If we're looking for a way forward, there's actually a really powerful example right next door in Bangladesh.
Bangladesh is a profound contrast. They brought in really stringent laws against acid sales and attacks back in 2002, and they paired it with massive public awareness campaigns.
And the result?
They saw the number of attacks drop by 15 to 20% every single year. They drove the number down from almost 500 attacks in 2002 to just 13 in 2024. Their approach is swift, it's punitive. They can seal a shop within 30 days for illegal acid sales.
That is the kind of efficiency survivors in India are demanding. Not just strong laws, but real consequences for delays, sensitizing the courts, and actually implementing the recommendations for a national fund for survivor rehabilitation. Let's transition now from domestic systemic failures to some pretty aggressive international geopolitics, specifically the immediate and frankly shocking policy shift by the Trump administration towards Venezuela right after his return to power in early 2025.
Yeah, this has already been dubbed the Donroe Doctrine.
This shift was immediate and incredibly dramatic, wasn't it? The focus was squarely on regime change against President Nicolas Maduro.
It was. It began with declaring a war on drugs against Maduro, which is, most experts agree Venezuela isn't a major source of drug production. Then came the military actions.
And they were swift.
Bombing civilian boats, deploying significant military assets to the Caribbean, a naval quarantine on oil tankers, and even a claimed clandestine CIA operation.
And this escalated so quickly, right up to large-scale airstrikes after Maduro actually offered to hold talks, followed by President Trump claiming on social media that Maduro had been captured. This level of aggression, you have to look at the core objectives.
You can trace it back to 3 interlocking strategic drivers that were laid out in the administration's new national security doctrine. The first is this concept of American primacy, which leads us to this Donroe Doctrine.
Okay, let's define that clearly. We all know the 1823 Monroe Doctrine, which basically established the Americas as the U.S. sphere of influence. How is this new Donroe Doctrine different?
It's a reframing. The Donroe Doctrine asserts that the U.S. has to vigorously deny influence or control by any outside powers, and they mean specifically China and Russia in Latin America. It views the Western Hemisphere as an exclusive sphere where American influence must be absolute.
So Maduro's defiance and his alliances are seen as a direct challenge to that.
An intolerable challenge right in America's backyard, which brings us straight to the second reason, countering Beijing and Moscow.
Right. Venezuela and Cuba actively seek strong ties with them, challenging that American hegemony.
And the economic ties are massive. China is Venezuela's largest oil purchaser, buying nearly 80% of its sales. They've invested heavily through the Belt and Road Initiative.
And there was a big deal signed recently.
A crucial one. In 2024, a Chinese corporation signed a $1 billion agreement with PDVSA, the state oil company, to develop 2 major oil fields. So removing Maduro accomplishes 2 things at once. It severs that key economic link, and it sends a powerful message to the whole region that cooperating with China comes with severe consequences.
And then there's the third driver, maybe the most tangible one of all. Oil. Securing control of Venezuelan oil.
The sheer scale is just difficult to overstate. Venezuela has 17% of the world's known oil reserves. over 300 billion barrels.
Which is how much more than the U.S.?
It's nearly 4 times the reserves held by the United States. And historically, U.S. companies like ExxonMobil and Gulf Oil were big players there until the nationalization waves.
The administration has been exceptionally clear about its intent to seize those resources.
Oh, absolutely. They have directly demanded that Venezuela return all stolen American oil, land, and assets. This isn't subtle. We know from John Bolton's memoirs that back in 2019, they were already pressuring opposition leaders to guarantee U.S. companies access if they took power.
And the president himself said something very direct back in 2023.
He did. He said, we would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil.
And the current opposition leader they seem to favor, Maria Corina Machado, she seems ready to play ball if the regime falls.
She has offered explicit support for this. Machado has said she would open up Venezuela's entire energy and mineral sector to foreign companies, which everyone understands means American companies. She literally promised to open up all, upstream, midstream, downstream. This aggressive campaign suggests they're moving fast to grab that strategic resource and diminish Chinese influence at the same time.
From the geopolitics of oil, we're going to transition to the origins of life itself. And this is thanks to some remarkable samples returned from the asteroid Bennu by NASA's OSIRIS-REx mission.
This is just phenomenal science. So OSIRIS-REx collected these samples from Bennu back in 2020, and the canister finally returned to Earth in September 2023.
And the whole goal was to sample a pristine, ancient body to unlock secrets about how the solar system formed and really how the building blocks of life got here.
Precisely. And the findings that were just published on December 2nd in Nature Geoscience are staggering. They've essentially completed the life inventory checklist.
What exactly did they find?
They reported detecting ribose. That's the sugar molecule that forms the backbone of RNA and glucose, which is vital for metabolism.
Okay, so when you combine that with what they'd already found, amino acids, nucleobases.
All 5 nucleobases, yes. When you put it all together, Bennu now contains every single inventory molecule that scientists believe is necessary for life to emerge.
That gives a huge boost to the RNA world hypothesis, doesn't it?
A dramatic boost. The RNA world theory posits that early life used RNA for both storing genetic info and for catalytic functions before the more stable DNA and proteins evolved.
So the implication is that asteroids like Bennu were basically delivery vehicles.
Exactly, that the early inner solar system was seeded by these carbonaceous asteroids, which delivered all these necessary sugars and amino acids to a young Earth over 3.5 billion years ago, making the emergence of life, highly probable.
But these complex sugars don't just form anywhere. What were the conditions like on Bennu's parent asteroid that allowed for this?
The parent asteroid was the perfect little chemical cradle. It formed way out beyond Saturn, about 4.6 billion years ago. And the process required a very specific environment. Very little liquid brine, a precise pH, and incredibly low temperatures. The fact that they found both 5 carbon sugars like ribose and 6 carbon sugars like glucose tells us those conditions were met.
And beyond the ingredients for life, they also found some other unique things, right? Some polymers and stellar dust.
Yes, 2 discoveries that were completely new for extraterrestrial samples. The first was carbamate polymers. These are sort of soft, gummy materials when they form, though they've hardened over billions of years. We just haven't seen this specific material in meteorites before.
And then there's the mystery of the ancient stardust.
That was maybe the biggest surprise for the geologists. Bennu has this unusually high concentration of supernova origin pre-solar grains. This is material from stars that exploded before our own sun was even born.
And the concentration was much higher than in other samples.
At least 6 times higher.
Yeah.
So it raises this fundamental question. Why is Bennu, which looks like a pretty ordinary asteroid, so uniquely rich in this stardust? It forces scientists to ask if it came from a really unusual part of the early solar system, or if we just need to sample more asteroids to find more like it.
It's incredible to think the universe literally delivered the blueprints for life to our doorstep. Now, let's pivot back to environmental devastation closer to home, focusing on the crisis plaguing the Cauvery River. The core problem, as highlighted in recent analysis, is that the Cauvery is acting less like a river and more like a massive sewage sink.
That metaphor is chillingly accurate. The Cauvery is an ecological lifeline, but across its entire basin, only a tiny fraction of the sewage that's generated gets adequate treatment. The vast majority just flows into the river untreated.
And the stories about industrial dumping are particularly sinister, especially around places like Metter.
At Metter, near the Big Dam, the claims from local farmers are consistent and alarming. They allege that industrial effluents are deliberately discharged at night, especially during flood season.
Why then?
The strategy is tactical. The massive force of the water release dilutes the waste and washes it downstream so fast that pollution control boards can't really detect or trace the source. The only evidence they see is, dead fish floating near the banks in the morning.
And what do the authorities, the Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board, say about this?
Well, there's a huge disconnect. The municipal authorities claim their sewage treatment plants are working and nothing is discharged. The TMPCB says their monthly water samples don't show dangerous pollution levels. So you have this stark contradiction between official reports and what people on the ground are seeing every day.
The problem seems to be compounded in urban areas, like Erode, because of all the industrial activity.
Erode is a perfect example of the sewage gap. It's home to over 500 dyeing and tannery units. The city generates 35 to 40 million liters of sewage a day, but only about 8 million of that is actually treated.
So a huge amount is just going straight into the river.
A huge amount. The Central Pollution Control Board actually classified a 17-kilometer stretch of the river there as officially polluted.
And in other places, like Namakkal, there's evidence of factories just completely bypassing the rules.
That's the regulatory loophole. Dyeing units that got shut down elsewhere just relocated to the Cauvery banks. They're supposed to treat and recycle their wastewater, but reports suggest they illegally use bore wells to pump clean river water out and then use the same pipelines to dump the raw, untreated effluents right back in.
Beyond the visible pollution, there's also this structural damage to the river's natural defenses and, of course, invisible chemical contaminants.
The structural damage is often overlooked. Traditional riverbank safeguards, these common lands that are meant to absorb floodwater and filter pollutants, have been systematically encroached upon by settlements and businesses.
And they just discharge their raw sewage directly in.
Straight into the river. And then you have the invisible threat. A critical 2021 study found a dangerous presence of pharmaceutically active compounds and heavy metals. They detected things like caffeine, anti-seizure meds, anti-inflammatories, even powerful antibiotics like ciprofloxacin.
Which means pharmaceutical waste isn't being broken down, and that contributes to antibiotic resistance.
A huge, huge problem.
And what's the end result for farmers downstream in regions like Nagapattinam?
The impact is severe. In Nagapattinam, nearly half the cultivable land is seeing a dramatic yield collapse. The chemicals are changing the soil structure, it's hardening, so crop roots can't penetrate. Farmers also report persistent, debilitating skin conditions from handling the contaminated water.
So finally, what steps is the government taking to deal with this?
Well, the state government has flagged this as a severe issue. They're moving to enforce stringent provisions under existing laws to target illegal discharge. And crucially, they're seeking major funding from the union government under the Nadantai Vazi Cauvery scheme.
And the goal of that scheme?
The explicit goal is to plug all sources of raw sewage and start a massive upgrade of treatment plants across the entire basin.
Okay, let's transition to a subject that occupies a massive chunk of global attention and wealth. The burgeoning longevity revolution. The quest not just to live longer, but to live better.
It's a revolution that has this fascinating contrast at its heart. On one side, you have this high-tech, commercialized biohacking industry, and on the other, you have the quiet, effortless longevity you see in places like Kerala, with centenarians living healthy lives on simple diets and with strong communities.
The global economic engine behind this is just staggering. How big is the market for wellness right now?
It's enormous. The global wellness industry was estimated at $6.8 trillion in 2024. India's share alone is $156 billion. And it's projected to hit almost $10 trillion globally by 2029.
At the extreme end of this, you have biohacking, and it seems to range from, personalized optimization to what you might call a performative spectacle.
Right. Biohacking is just making incremental changes to optimize health. The spectacle is someone like Brian Johnson, who publicly details his extreme regimen to not die. Then you have figures like Dave Asprey, who promote personalized protocols with supplements and wearables.
And the technology is blurring the line between preventative care and human enhancement.
Absolutely. Take something like the Brain X360 wearable. It maps your brain fatigue in real time and uses AI to suggest interventions. But this kind of high-tech personalization is incredibly expensive. An NAD IV drip, for example, can cost 30,000 to 50,000 rupees for a single session in Mumbai.
Which raises huge ethical questions about access, and it's a sharp contrast to the community-based approach of the Blue Zones.
It is. Blue zones are these areas with high concentrations of healthy centenarians. The original 5 Okinawa, Sardinia, and so on all share non-tech factors. Plant-based diets, constant movement, strong social bonds, a sense of purpose.
And the concept is expanding globally.
Yes, Singapore and Ulu in Finland are being added to the list. Kerala is often cited as a potential Indian blue zone, but it's hard to categorize Indian regions because we struggle with reliable, large-scale birth and age data.
This entire industry is being driven by a demographic reality we can't avoid. The world is rapidly getting older.
The shift is seismic. Birth rates are falling, lifespans are increasing. The UN projects that the global 60-plus population will nearly double by 2050, and India faces the most acute challenge. By 2067, it's projected to have the single largest population of older adults in the world.
And the consensus is that India is just not ready for this.
Experts describe India as critically unprepared. The nation is heading for a triple burden: earning money, battling age-related disease, and needing basic elderly care. Our healthcare system is mostly reactionary, not preventive.
Which is why it's so critical to develop India-specific science rather than just importing models designed for other populations.
That's the whole foundation of ISK's Longevity India initiative and their BRAD study. They stress that you can't just use algorithms developed for Caucasian populations. Chronic illnesses like heart disease and diabetes are showing up much earlier in Indians, often in their 30s and 40s. We need our own biomarkers and risk profiles.
Ultimately, the ideal model is someone like Methapan, that centenarian in Kerala. He embodies health span, not just lifespan.
Exactly. He's active, he's eating home-cooked food, he's living fully. The goal has to be to bridge the gap between expensive biohacking and the attainable habits of the blue zones, extending the years of quality life for everyone.
Our final deep dive takes us deep into history, but also right into present-day cultural and political identity. We're focusing on the astonishing archaeological digs at Keeladi in Tamil Nadu.
The Keeladi digs have been an absolute watershed moment for Tamil history. The sheer scale of the discoveries. I mean, in the local imagination, it's being compared to discovering the Indus Valley civilization.
Let's start with the central scientific finding, the dating. What did the carbon dating actually reveal?
The samples sent to the Beta Analytic Lab in Miami confirmed that cultural deposits could be dated back to the 6th century BCE. And this is hugely significant because it pushed the timeline of the site back by 300 years, firmly establishing Keeladi as a purely Sangam site. It's tangible proof of an advanced civilization from that period.
And the physical evidence points to a remarkable level of social advancement, with some parallels even being drawn to Harappan culture.
The parallels are definitely there. Archaeologists found similarities in graffiti marks on pots, in urban planning features, and artifacts like conch shell bangles. Keeladi is providing physical, verifiable evidence that seems to confirm descriptions found in ancient Sangam literature.
And this is where history meets modern politics. The discovery was immediately swept into a cultural and political whirlwind.
The moment the dating was confirmed, the site became a launchpad for regional pride, for language chauvinism, and a powerful counter-narrative against what many in the region see as hegemonic forces in the wider Indian story. Keeladi became a symbol of self-assertion.
And the recent book, The Dig, frames this tension perfectly, doesn't it? The tension between the pure science and the immediate political use of it.
It does. The Dig details the lives of the people who made it happen, the archaeologists like Amarnath Ramakrishna and the political tug-of-war they faced, especially with the Archaeological Survey of India. It shows how a finding of this magnitude, confirming a sophisticated civilization that lasted 800 years, inevitably gets tied to politics and identity.
So the challenge for scholars now is to separate the staggering historical value from the heated modern interpretations.
That is the essential critical lens we need. While the finding absolutely warrants immense pride, the focus has to shift toward a more sedate, holistic study of history. It needs to move beyond the immediate chest-thumping pride to a sober acknowledgement of Keeladi's role as part of the complex, advanced melting pot of ancient Indian civilizations.
That entire spectrum of knowledge, from ancient dust delivering the seeds of life to modern political structures failing to deliver basic justice, brings us to a powerful, challenging question for you, our listener. We saw today that Bangladesh achieved an astonishing 15–20% annual reduction in acid attacks through comprehensive, efficient enforcement penalizing sellers and sensitizing courts, while India's strong anti-acid attack laws are neutered by a 16-year delay and judicial insensitivity. When we connect this pattern to the regulatory struggles at the Thiruvananthapuram airport, where the regulator has to propose a 5% financial penalty just to force service compliance from a monopoly, we have to ask, is the creation of a strong law merely the easiest part of governance? And is the deeply painful, necessary work of systemic reform, judicial sensitization, rapid police investigation, and consistent regulatory enforcement, a measure of a state's true commitment to its citizens, even when that work is far less politically gratifying than passing the initial legislation.
It forces a reflection on priorities. When rapid financial monetization, like the NMP, is prioritized over rigorous control mechanisms, the inevitable outcome is concentrated power and compromised public interest, whether that compromise is rising airport fees or the complete denial of justice. The speed of the financial machine consistently seems to outpace the necessary speed of regulatory and judicial oversight.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.